and welcome everyone. My name is Neil Sharma. I'm the section editor for the iPod podcast for a new journal called iGIE. This is one of our initial kickoffs, and I'm here with our editor-in-chief, Dr. Chris Thompson. Chris, can you say hello?
Hi, good to see you, Neil.
Thank you for spending a little time with us. We want to give everybody an introduction to this new journal. It's in the family of GIE, which is gastrointestinal endoscopy. And we're going to spend a little time today on the couch and talk about what iGIE is and what it stands for. But first, from the editor-in-chief, we'd like to hear a little more about you, Chris.
Sure. Well, I'm the director of endoscopy at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I also co-direct the Center for Weight Management and Wellness there, and I'm a professor at Harvard Medical School. And I've been doing therapeutic endoscopy and bariatric endoscopy now for over 15 years.
So Chris, I can say from my own personal experience, coming up as an advanced endoscopist, you've been a stalwart for our field. You've helped innovate in a variety of ways, from endoluminal work to others that you've trained, like myself, throughout the field. And innovation has always been kind of a hallmark of your practice. Can you talk a little bit about how innovation has influenced you in terms of your practice or approach to endoscopy as a whole?
Sure. I think that's one of the most exciting things about advanced endoscopy is its growth and how you need to constantly be solving new problems. And it's very fertile ground for innovation. And really that started back when I was an advanced fellow. And one of my mentors, Bill Brugge, started to assign me all of these, what seemed like engineering design tasks, right? And I thought, I'm not an engineer. How can I do this? And then you just start kind of thinking out of the box and thinking of new ways to do things. And, it led to me getting involved in several entrepreneurial ventures as well. So I think that it's something that's very exciting. It's certainly a great field to innovate in.
Endoscopy right now, I feel like is at its heyday in terms of that growth, that explosive growth that maybe we've seen in fields like cardiology, for example, for interventional cardiology or EP back in the 80s and 90s. Talk to me about some of the things in endoscopy that are exciting you the most as far as novel applications or new tools.
Sure. Well, there's certain hotbeds of activity right now, one of which is bariatric endoscopy. The first ASGE was done by myself and Rob Hawes now 10 years ago, actually, this past April. So it's been a long time, right? But still so much growth, so much innovation. The suture patterns evolve, the devices evolve, and it's getting better. And I think that bariatric endoscopy is one of those hotbeds. We have now evolved a bit into thinking about mechanisms of action, right? And we're trying to actually design procedures with physiology in mind, rather than just replicating surgical procedure with an endoscope. And I think that's what's very exciting right now. And that's what's leading to these newer procedures that I think will be more effective. Additionally, third space work, of course, is really catching on. And that's quite exciting, seeing ESD and the various POEM procedures really start to flourish.
When I hear you talk about bariatrics and metabolic endoscopy, I hear you first talking about the patient and then talking from a perspective of a GI physician in terms of pathophysiology, and then trying to create tools for that, which might be a little different, as you mentioned, than the surgical approach. Do you see like the hallmark of the combination of your background as a GI physician, but then also a specialist in endoscopy?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand the patient and the illness, and really come at it from that aspect. Physiology is critical, and I think that's what's allowing us to develop these procedures. And I also think that kind of being in between fields is also helpful. So a lot of what I'm doing and what you're doing is kind of surgery, right? So we're in between traditional endoscopy and what was thought to be traditional surgery. And we're living in that in-between space. And I think that's where innovation happens a lot of the time. So that's my perspective on that.
I like that. So you're coming from a unique background, which I would agree with. I do a lot of work in the oncologic space, but I'm not a traditional medical oncologist or a surgical oncologist, but certainly, we're the ones using things like EUS and or cholangioscopy to diagnose and stage these cancers. And we're there and we see some poor outcomes in pancreatic biliary space. And I think when I hear you talk I always think about this old coined phrase of necessity is the mother of invention. And I can't think of a better place inside of medicine than some of the limited needs and space that we have for things that have high morbidity. So, for example, these large colon polyps. Can you talk to me a little bit more about some of the necessities that you see where we could truly be thoughtful and, if not more creative?
Sure. Several different areas. The first that comes to mind, of course, is ESD. There are far too many unnecessary colectomies being done for polyps that could be removed via endoscopy. And so that's clearly a need right there. We need to be able to train more people and give them the skills to do endoscopic submucosal dissection. And, that might require new instrumentation. And so that's kind of one area that's very fertile for innovation.
So as we think about innovation and you think about the family of journals that are out there for endoscopy as a whole or GI as a whole, GIE has been a stalwart. We've seen its growth. We've seen its impact factor grow significantly over the past 10 years. GIE then spun off and did video GIE, and now you have iGIE. So talk to me a little bit about the totality of the family of gastrointestinal endoscopy, and then we can talk a little bit more about the new journal.
Sure. So GIE has been tremendous, right? That's my go-to journal, always has been. That's where I feel at home, and I think that it has been growing. It's a phenomenal journal, and I think as it focuses more on the big studies, the big trials, the hardcore research, it has to kind of get away from the early stage stuff, your kind of preclinical animal work, the engineering studies, the case series that, perhaps once used to find its way into the journal, but now it's just a little too competitive for those types of papers. So that's where iGIE really is going to shine, because it's kind of what, in many ways, GIE used to be for many of us doing innovation work. I still love publishing my bigger studies in GIE, but now it's really hard to get those kind of earlier works in. And I think that's where we're focusing our attention on iGIE. So, it's in the innovation as far as, preclinical engineering studies, animal work. It's in investigation and focusing on early clinical series. And of course, I think another part of the journal is going to be insights and some other uniquenesses that there's just no room in the other journals for right now, which would be historical perspectives. I think that's one key thing. Really seeing where we came from to know where we're going is quite important.
The concept of thinking different and being different is part of what creates novel items in our field. And I think of iGIE as potentially a space for us to reflect that or demonstrate that to others, and perhaps that sparks more ingenuity. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So yeah, definitely. I think that there are things within iGIE that are very different and haven't really been pursued much in the past. One of those things, of course, is the interdisciplinary section, where we're kind of incorporating, different aspects of care. So we might be bringing in, like, for instance, the cancer center work you do, right? There's all sorts of kind of other specialists that are working there. And the bariatric stuff that I do, where we're working with psychologists and we're working with, nutritionists. Additionally, the advanced practice providers might have a home there as well. And they're going to have, have a section that they're kind of in charge of, and they're going to be able to, focus that on things that they're interested in. As well as, different things like hybrid procedures with surgery. So I think that's one thing that's different. That's quite exciting, but there are many others as well. Right now, digital health is big. And where do digital health publications go, right? So this is going to be a home for those as well. And I think that's one other very exciting aspect to the new journal.
The interdisciplinary piece is extremely exciting to me. We've not had an opportunity to have a journal that appeals to perhaps a multitude of specialties or finds the spot for that intersection. And that intersection is really where a lot of the novelty is where it's occurring. And I think that the fact that this journal has the opportunity to reflect upon multidisciplinary care or interdisciplinary care, however we may phrase that, it will appeal to a wide variety of people. And that was very creative to think of that aspect. So innovation and our readership for GIE is happening in the United States, of course, but we'd be foolish to think it only happens here. It's happening throughout the world. And we have a lot of readers for GIE that live abroad. So talk to me a little bit about appealing to and incorporating the international perspective in iGIE.
That's critical for us. Absolutely. There's so much innovation going on, around the globe that we want to be able to capture that. And I think part of it is just by being inclusive and bringing them in. So they're part of the journal from the very beginning. We have associate editors that are from other countries that really have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in different regions. And that's definitely going to be critical to our success.
A lot of innovation that happens for us, we're utilizing tools that are not necessarily designed for the applications. And we know that in endoscopy, there's many times that we're repurposing tools or using tools off label. Ideally, we're working hand in hand with industry, creating opportunities for them to develop new products and or invest in research and development. We've not always had a great framework to have early showcasing of some of that tools and or innovation. Do you think iGIE will be able to appeal to industry partners and create a new platform for some of that type of work?
I certainly hope so. This is a friendly place for them to show that early work. It's different than when you're dealing with a large randomized controlled trial that's seeking FDA approval, right? This is oftentimes proof of concept work, and you can be a little closer with industry in that space. And we also hope to have an industry perspective that is reflected in the journal. And it's not meant to be a sales pitch for any piece of equipment, but it's just to capture kind of their perspective on a certain field. Why do they think that we're struggling to broadly adopt ESD? Maybe their perspective is different than ours, right? So it'd be nice to hear that, and I think that that's going to be something that we look forward to incorporating in the journal as well.
What's been the traditional partnership with industry relative to the endoscopy space in your mind?
I think that's where true innovation happens, is when you have industry working closely with the GI doctors, right? When you have these silos where, the gastroenterologists, or in any field, right, the medical doctors or the surgeons are kind of in their own space, and then industry is in their own space, and, they don't freely interact and they don't freely work together, I think that it stalls, innovation stalls, and development of new procedures and new devices stalls. So I think that, the journal is going to have to keep that in mind as well as we move forward, that we kind of want to do this in the spirit of collaboration.
In the spirit of thinking differently and giving a refreshing approach, which I know iGIE will be able to facilitate, how do you create the balance between involving some conversations with industry, but not being influenced by them? Because we certainly want to continue to be thoughtful researchers that are uninfluenced in that space.
Yeah, that's obviously very tricky. And, it's good to have, put some people in charge of making sure we're not getting too close. And we all have our COI, and we want to make sure we're aware of that. And it's important to disclose that, obviously. And that's key. So then a reader can judge, if they think the person might be being influenced by that. Additionally, it's also good to be careful with how you fund the journal. This is an open access journal, right? And we do want to minimize fees for authors, and it would be helpful to be able to have money coming in to support it in that regard. However, whenever money starts coming into something, there's the fear of influence and undue influence. So you have to make sure you divorce that. So the money is going to another place, and then it can't it isn't tied at all to any expected kind of coverage from the journal or by the journal at all. And you don't want to ever tie, that kind of funding to a product directly. So I think that's just, there's things that fortunately we're working with very experienced group in Elsevier as well as the ASGE staff, and they know how to kind of make sure we don't go down the wrong path in that regard.
So when we look at the magnitude of novel journals out there, and there's quite a few, we now have this opportunity with iGIE for an open access journal. What is the void that you're hoping to fulfill with iGIE?
Well, there's a lot of great journals, as you mentioned, but I think that what's going to be unique about iGIE is it could be really the home for innovation in these early kind of developmental studies, whether it be in endoscopy specifically, or whether it be within digital health, whether it be international, gastrointestinal research, whether it be interdisciplinary. So I think those are areas that are kind of evolving and that are very exciting. And I think that this will be the home for that. So if you want to kind of see what's next on the horizon, what new is going to be coming down that pipeline, this is the journal that I hope we'll turn to.
So you were able to choose a really nice and diverse group of individuals to help be section editors for iGIE. I think they all probably have your framework or peace of mind relative to innovation. Can you take me through some of those section editors?
Sure. That's one of the most exciting parts about this is I get to work with people that I really enjoy working with and that are very successful, and they're motivated to make this successful as well. So that's something that is really going to make this fun for all of us, I hope. And of course, there's you, who's in charge of the podcast, but much more than that as well moving forward, especially with your work in the Cancer Center and with interdisciplinary care. So we're looking forward to having you on board. Marvin Yu is one of my colleagues from the Brigham, who I worked closely with for years, and he does a lot of entrepreneurial projects as well as early preclinical work. And so he has kind of a real feel for that, spends a lot of time in the animal lab. So he's going to be running a section that looks at those preclinical studies and those engineering studies. Hiro Aihara, ESD expert from Japan, who he brought to the United States. And he's been just a real asset to us here in the United States. And he's also been an extensive publisher. So he is going to be looking at those early clinical trials, and we're fortunate to have him. Janice Laster is someone who is I've known for years as well. She's a bariatric endoscopist, but where she's excelled is in marketing herself. She's tremendous. She started a solo private practice in Washington, D.C., and she's made that successful. And you have to know something about social media and being able to market yourself to do that, as well as she has a great depth of knowledge in gastroenterology. So we're grateful she's joining us. Jennifer Maranke is going to be joining us as well. She's likely heading up the Editorial Review Board, and she'll be in charge of keeping the trains running on time. And I've worked with her. She's from my alma mater at Penn State, and we're fortunate to have her joining us as well. And of course, there's Ken Chang. So Ken, he's going to be looking at the insight section and heading that up. So historical perspectives will fold into that, as well as several reviews. And he has this this wealth of experience, having been here really at the very beginning of EUS, and we're fortunate to have him joining us as well. Then there's Phil G, who is one of our advanced endoscopy fellows, who runs tissue resection at MD Anderson now, and he's one of the best writers that I've ever met. He trained classically at Berkeley, and he's phenomenal, and of course has a great depth of knowledge. So we're fortunate to have him. And then Ji Young Bang, who is a publishing machine, also has that kind of different perspective, not coming from a traditional academic environment, but publishing more than most academicians. So I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, and I think it should let people know that we're taking this seriously, and we really do have an all-star team that we're fortunate to have joining us on this project.
So thoughts about fellows and their approach to iGIE?
Sure. I think this is a natural fit for fellow projects, because a lot of times, they only have a few years to accomplish something, and many of their projects are pilot studies, and this would be a perfect home for those studies. So we certainly hope that fellows send us their publications, and look forward to reading the articles.
So I'm sure as iGIE launches, it's going to be open access. There's going to be a lot of people who have some exciting work that we probably don't even know about, and now they have a new home for it. So what are your thoughts to all those who are kind of looking for a place to publish some innovative research?
Absolutely. Send us your articles. We are opening the doors. This will be listed on PubMed eventually. It is a process to get there. However, we have Elsevier behind us, and we've done this with GIE and video GIE. So it should be within a couple of years, and it is retroactive. So any publications that would be accepted now will be on PubMed, as soon as that does convert. So, and also right now is a great time as we're starting off, because as we're transitioning any articles that are coming from GIE kind of over to iGIE, I think any publishing fees are likely to be waived as well.
Outstanding. I'm going to ask you one other thing. Let's talk about open access, because I don't think people understand, like a lot of people are citing open access stuff, right? And especially when they're giving these talks all over the world, I'm so surprised how many people actually will utilize open access journals because they can't get access to something like a GIE. So let's just like make an appeal real quick. So one thing I think that's novel in the new world with social media and such a big footprint for GI endoscopists throughout the world, not just in the United States, is the ability to access open access journals. And iGIE will start off as open access. So while it's not on PubMed, which may or may not be a positive for some people in their minds, there will be the ability to access and have your article read by so many. So what do you think about open access journals and how they're being utilized in today's age?
Yeah, I think open access is the future, right? It's something that everyone can get and read. You don't need to be a member of a certain society or subscribe to that journal, and you don't have to pay money to read the article. So that's very exciting. So more and more people do turn to open access sources. And you see this all the time with presentations. If you look at what they're referencing, a lot of times they're referencing, preferentially these articles in an open access journal. So I think it really does, increase the potential for broader reach when you're open access. And I think that's definitely an asset and something that, will help this journal grow relatively quickly.
Absolutely. In my mind, open access is egalitarian. It allows a lot of people the opportunity to publish some very innovative or different work, or maybe come from perspectives where they're not from the traditional academic or tertiary center, but they have some really great work. And so this would be a great place with iGIE, just being so forward thinking, for them to get an opportunity to showcase some of the work that they do. So it would be great for them to submit their articles directly to iGIE.
Absolutely.